Okay, I think I'm going to get started so that Barbara and Lori have enough time to share their wisdom with us. And again, this is 11B workshop session, and it's entitled "You Are Not My Real Mom" and 9 other real adoptive parenting conversations. In this workshop, we'll hear from both Barbara Herel, who is the founder and host of Every Family's Got One, a story that is, which is a storytelling show and podcast devoted to true family stories. She's also a writer and blogger, wife, and adoptive mother. Lori Holden aims to transform adoption through openness, which she defines as dealing with what is. Lori begins with the premise that adoption creates a split in a person between their biology and the nature where they came from and their biography, where the nurturing is happening. Before we begin, I want to introduce myself. I'm Michelle Hochstetter, a family support specialist in the Central New York area for the Adoptive and Foster Family Coalition. I will be your moderator for the Zoom today. I want to remind you, in case you haven't heard this, that the training certificates are available for this conference. You must have your Zoom name listed as the name you'd like to appear on your certificate. I will be putting the link for the request in that chat box, both at the beginning here and also at the end. I also put 2 other links guiding you to our book table fundraiser, which, by the way, you can buy some awesome books on adoption and foster care, but also this fundraiser is for any book you may want to be purchasing. And also another link with the conference workshop evaluations, which are so helpful to us. Please know if you have any questions during the workshop, feel free to put them in the chat, unless the presenter specifically asks for anyone to unmute themselves. Barbara and Lori would like to save the questions to the end. Feel free to put questions in as they come in mind, and then I will be reading the questions towards the end, and they can take the energy then to answer the questions. Additionally, we are encouraging all workshop presenters to add any handouts, slides, notes, etc. in their specific event with the AFFCNY network so that the conversation and education can continue. With that, Barbara and Lori, we're ready for you to start.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Barbara and I are just so happy to have you here today, choosing to be here on a Saturday. It's morning for me. I think it just passed into afternoon for most of you, but that you're here to invest in making adoption world better in small ways and large ways. So thank you so much for being here. Barbara and I have had a blast getting ready for this, and we hope that we bring you some heavy situations with a lot of lightness. And so, Barbara, take it over.
Yeah. Oh, hi. So just a little intro. I'm one of those older moms. So I was 45 at the time when I adopted my daughter, and now I'm 58 and she's 13. So between menopause and menstrual cycles, we got a lot of excitement going on in our home. And Lori and I met. I was a writer at Adoptive Families magazine, and that's when Lori and I first met. An article was about openness, so I don't know, that's where we started.
Yeah, I've been doing this for about 21 years in terms of adoptive parenting. My children have both, a son and a daughter, both just crossed the threshold into young adulthood. So things look very different now than it did when Barbara and I started writing together and experiencing all of this. So what we're going to do today is cover at least 9, probably 9 plus the big one, and maybe even more, because these are tricky situations. And to be prepared for them is to be able to come up with some more presence and some ways that build connection with your child instead of separation with your child in that moment. So we have divided these questions, these situations, into 2 main categories. And one is the things that happen kind of inside the home with your between you and your child. And that's a much bigger category because you spend a lot of time with your child, at least a lot more than you do with the second types of situations, which are outside the home with the lady in the target line or the guy at on the soccer field at practice, or all those kinds of things. So we'll be spending a lot more time on the parts that are child focused, so that you can kind of just see how lessons learned out in the field. We're going to share probably some mistakes as well as some successes, and not only what to say, but the orientation to come from in order to build that connection with your child. Always trust in connections. Mm-hmm. So we're going to start first with conversation that come up in the home with our children. And we're going to start with the grandmother of them all.
Do you want to share the screen?
Oh, yes. Thank
Our
you.
fabulous PowerPoint
so many buttons. Here we go. This is what it takes too. Okay, here we go.
Yay!
Grandmother of them all is.
Oh my God. Yes, you're not my real mom or dad. Yeah. Ouch.
You heard this, Barbara.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So actually, that's something all adoptive parents will experience this for sure. And I really was waiting for it for a very long time. It was like, 4 years old, 5 years old, 6. And it really happened like 6.5, 7 for my daughter. She was just like, you're not my real mom. And I was like, oh, wow. And I think I took her by surprise because I was so excited. I was like, just waiting. And I said, you know what? I am your real mom because I take care of you and I'm here with you and raising you. And you know what? Kay, she's your real mom too, because she grew you inside of her and she gave birth to you and she loves you. And you know what? We're both your real moms. Isn't that great? And she was kind of like, yeah, that's cool. So, and that was it for her. And I think I had asked her, probably, I think it came before, she said that I asked her to pick up something in her room and, so, you can't tell me what to do sort of thing. So I said, listen, so go, clean up your room. And if you still want to talk about, adoption afterwards, we can do that. And then, she went off. I'm not quite sure if she actually picked up her room or not, but it was, I was ready for this question. There are other questions that get me, but this one I was like on it.
And I really like what you did there because you took one of the things that I talk about a lot is shifting from an either or perspective that came out of the closed adoption era where you could only have one legitimate set of parents and shifting that over to a both and heart set where we have two legitimate sets of parents and families, and that lets the child kind of claim and be claimed by all of their important people. So when you did that about you and Kay, you were becoming expansive and multiplying and adding instead of subtracting and substituting.
And I always think it's so, we hold on. I think there are some things that really, hurt us, like the word real, as adoptive parents, right? And I think that kids, that's just the way they talk and way people talk because they don't know the language. So I think that's, I just think that's also something to take in mind because I remember, being very insulted, like adopt a highway, sort of thing. So I think the words, we really need to take that power away from them and just know that, because adopt does mean taking on something. In other contexts. And I think it's just taking the sting out of those words. So the more that we know this is going to come out, this is the way people talk, so that we can also advocate, and educate.
And no matter how conscientious you are about not using the word real to delegitimize your child's other parents, they might come to you with it anyway, because that's what they might be hearing at school. That's because, like you said, Barbara, that's how people talk.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think what can happen for parents who haven't started doing their healing and their inner work about being adoptive parents is when they hear the word real, they get sore about the word only. They're hearing, you're not the only mom, or you're not the only dad. And if you've not come to terms with that fully, that's going to hurt. And then when your child does say something to you like, you can't make me do it, you're not even my real mom. And your 6-year-old then, or 7-year-old in your case, Barbara, you lose it and you get triggered and you assert yourself. I am your mom. Who do you think made you breakfast this morning? Who is going to drive you around today? Your 7-year-old has turned you into a 7-year-old, and then there's no wise mind driving this bus. So not only that, but your child is going to use that button again once they know that it exists the next time they want to try to get some control over you.
Yeah.
And also, I think the biggest thing is that you've missed an opportunity for connection. When your wound gets in there and keeps and builds that separation, I am your real mom, you are wrong. I have needs and you're not meeting my needs right now with your language. You know, that's all kind of coming out with the vibe, not with the words, but instead, in a moment of connection, if your child says to you, you can't make me clean my room, you're not even my real mom.
Right.
Instead, if you take a moment of presence from a healed space and say, are you thinking about her right now? I am too. I wonder if we could call her, or whatever that next step would be. And then you can also figure out, is this really about just not wanting to do the room? Or is this about, I'm thinking about my birth moment. I don't know how else to say it. It just came out.
Right.
So in those moments where we can build connection and we can walk alongside our child, but it really comes from neutralizing that word real, which can mean only, which can trigger our insecurities, and doing a lot of our own work before we get to that point, like you did.
Yay.
All right. That was the grandmother of them all.
Oh, yeah.
Here's another good one.
Yeah.
She loved you so much.
Yep. She placed you for adoption. Yep. When I started telling my daughter her adoption story, which was right from the beginning, which is terrific because you can make all your flubs and you have, just someone who's just more interested in pulling your hair than what you're actually saying. And I remember telling her story, and I actually said, she loved you so much, she placed you for adoption. And as soon as the words actually came out of my mouth, I was like, wow, that really doesn't feel right. Someone loved you so much that they gave you to somebody else. Like it just did not sit right. So I changed that to, she loves you so much, period, as one thought. And then, and really to talk about, she placed you for adoption because at that time, her circumstances, it would have happened to any baby at that time because she just couldn't care for any baby that came along. So, and that was truthful, and it just, it felt right. It felt.
I love what you did with that. You depersonalized it away from the child to make it about any baby at that time. Because what we're trying to do with words, which are really inadequate for dealing with baby wounds, is to try to depersonalize it and make it so that the child understands as best they can that they were not the cause of it. They were not the reason. There was not something wrong with them for being placed.
Right.
They don't always get that in their body because these are pre-verbal memories. But if we have the words and we have that vibe, we can kind of transmit that to them as well.
Yeah. And I think that's why, you have to start talking right from the beginning, because this is where you're going to find out your mistakes without it. So it's really yourself getting comfortable with all the conversation. And I know you had a very interesting story on the way home from the hospital.
Yeah, we were told by our agency, and I thought it was ridiculous. They said, you should start telling the story on the way home from the hospital. And I was like, what? She's 3 days old, but that makes no sense to me. But I'm dutiful and obedient, and I did it. And I realized, just like you did, Barbara, that this wasn't about her hearing in those early days, my daughter. It was about me telling and me finding out as I'm telling, as I'm processing, as I'm figuring out our narrative, and I'm finding out the pointy parts that hurt me. It's my chance to know where I need to get some help, do some work, so that the story feels good to me. I can accept it, warts and all. And I've done my work by the time she is able to hear and understand that my wounds have been dealt with, and hers, and she can be free to do her work without worrying about me.
Right. Yeah, that's so important. It's like you would never want your kid to go down the path by themselves. You have to be there to support them. Yes.
As far as this sentiment too, I love how you broke it into two separate statements, because it just seems really counterintuitive to think that equating loving you with leaving you is a good idea.
Right.
That sets a really difficult template for a child in their future intimate relationships. Loving equals leaving. And who likes to be left? Not anybody.
No one.
All right. Shall we move on, Barbara? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's great.
All right. Number 3. Oh, this is another biggie. When and how do I tell my child that they were adopted?
Aha. Well, we know the answer, I'm sure. It's right from the beginning. And it really does surprise me a lot, like in, adoption community forums, just like how many adoptive parents, it's, oh, my child is 6 and I haven't, told them yet. And it's, you want to be supportive to begin now. But yeah, it's always very shocking. So, and again, it's like, it's going to happen. So, do the work right from the beginning. So at 6, years old, you are comfortable with your story. And I think that's really what those early years are all about. Like you said before, it's about us getting comfortable with the story, with the tellings of the story, so we can be there for our kids when they do ask. And I think also when, like where you tell them, where they're when they're older, it's like in the back of when you're driving, so you're not having that eye contact, or, late at night, to bring up stories about adoption or talk about birth family, because I think those are like those softer times. And in my family, it just feels more, connected and quiet. You can have those kinds of conversations.
Yeah, you brought up a couple things that I want to touch on too. One is that people come to these forums asking for help for whatever reason they haven't told yet. 4 years old, 5 years old, 6-year-old, whatever. And I do think it's important, we in the adoption community, when somebody comes to us with that, instead of making somebody feel really bad for coming forth with an issue, I think if we meet them where they are, nobody's intending to be a bad parent and intending to withhold information. They just perhaps don't know better. Maybe they were given faulty advice for whatever reason. So we meet them where they are, and we help them, because at that point, why they haven't told doesn't matter as much as let's get this back on track and let's figure out what it's going to take for you to have this conversation. And one of the things that I counsel people when I'm coaching on this is I ask them to ask themselves the question, what is preventing you from having this conversation? Because if they can look at what that fear, it's usually a fear, what that fear is that's keeping you from having it, what's your biggest fear about how this conversation is going to go, then that can be worked on, that can be looked at. And I think you've told me before, Barbara, that so many times the fears that we have about how these conversations go are not how it goes. So it really is.
Yeah, right. The biggest, you just think it's going to be like, oh my God, how do I, because I think we have such big feelings around it, because we're, looking at it like, oh, if it's information that, just makes you sad, that you have to share it, and it doesn't have to be this heavy sort of demeanor when you tell it. And also the kid, I think, is a lot of times like, oh, okay, because it's just, you're giving not the whole story, but little nuggets as they go along and grow. So I think that's a thing to keep in mind too. You're not like telling them the whole story. It's one little piece that you've been working on, like a tiny little piece. And then as they get older, can understand more, you're adding more information in.
Yeah, and you've talked to me before about the how, which is like looking for prompts. Can you tell how you would advise that?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Looking for prompts of, how to bring it up in the moment.
Yeah.
Pregnant woman or.
Right. I think, prompts, it could just be, from your child, like they are great in math, or, like my daughter's very good in math. And so it's like, wow, you know what? Kay was really good in math too. And I bet that's where, you got it from, this math brainiac of yours, it's like, it's just looking, it could be a television show or a book that you're reading together. And so there's so many prompts, or looking at, families that walk by, like I think that's a huge one to talk about. There's so many pregnant women. It's like, oh, look, you grew in, look at that woman. She's got a baby growing, in her belly. We of course say uterus. And, I kind of say those words because to tick off my older aunt who thinks you shouldn't use appropriate, the things that things are. So uterus, vagina. Aunt Joan didn't like that. But looking, it's such a great opportunity, because it's not only that to start the conversation, like you grew in Kay's belly, but it's also like, then you can just point to, as they get older, it's like, oh, look at that family. You learn about different families, and it's like, oh, so they're a blended family, and that's how that family works. And we're an adoptive family, and we have family, in another state. And so it's just normalizes, and it keeps the conversation going.
Sometimes I hear parents say, we'll tell him when he's ready to understand. And what that translates in my brain, what I'm sometimes thinking they really mean is, we're waiting until we're comfortable with it, instead of we're waiting until he's comfortable with it. So again, it's that comfort level of working out your story. And this did come up in a forum a couple of years ago. It was right before the pandemic. And I remember that because I wrote a post called it in January of 2020 saying, it's 2020. Why do we still suck at adoption telling? And so there are some more resources on that. If you Google suck at adoption telling, you will be able to find that post. Like you said,
and
there's
very simply a book, there's so many great adoption books. And, my daughter just loved the Tell Me the Day about
the Jamie Lee Curtis book.
The Jamie Lee Curtis, which, I mean, there's so many more, but she just loved that big picture of that naked crying baby. So that's why we had that. She just always wanted to hear that. And also we used our adoption profile book, like to go through it, because we had so many pictures of, our family in it, and just to talk about it. So that was
I can see why those family profile books would really come in handy there to help fill in any child who does, children don't remember their first year till.
Yeah.
So having those picture books, or whenever the child comes into your home, and help them fill in their narrative. We want to be able to turn over a complete narrative to them.
Yeah.
Eventually at some point.
Yeah. And I just wanted this first question over here, no, I grew in your belly. And I think that does happen with little kids, because I know, like, again, my daughter had said that to me, like, oh, we were talking about, where she grew, and she was like, no, in yours, in mama's. And I said, no, not in mine. And again, I think this could be a moment where an adoptive parent feels like, oh, I don't want to, like, I'm going to break their heart, because your heart is a little like giving. And but I don't think it has to be, again, it can have a lightheartedness to it. And I was just like, no, honey, oh, I wish I could have grew you in my belly, but I couldn't. And, thankfully, Kay could. And I'm so happy she did, because you're you. And so I think, that might be one thing that really, again, kind of sits heavy on an adoptive parent's heart, which it doesn't have to be. Yeah. And it just doesn't. And even if it does, you don't have to present it that way.
You also were in the position, Barbara, to have to answer the question, from your daughter, why was I the only one of my birth siblings who was adopted?
Right. And, and that's when I was like, it was because of the circumstances and that time. So any baby, it wasn't you. I wanted to let her know that had nothing to do with her, that she's perfect and great. But it was the circumstances at that time. It would have been any baby. And so, little jokes, I guess, that happened within adoptive families. She was like, oh, mom, what if it was Leo, that if he was that baby at that time, because he's like a little scutch, her younger sibling. And, so that's like one of the laughing points, like, oh, yeah. That, he's a scutch, that's for sure. But, and I think that, she kind of took that in. And also, that's a question that has been asked over the years, like, as she got older and those late at night. So we've had, conversations about it. And certainly different now because she's older than when she was, first asked those questions. So it's just giving her more of that information.
Yeah, the whys tend to be pretty basic on the earlier. And as the child is, Angela Tucker's told me, stop saying child, say adoptee. As the adoptee becomes more and more able to understand the story and they just grow cognitively, the whys do get more complex too. And so how somebody gets a baby in their belly, and all of those whys lead to some really difficult things. That there's going to be the sex talk, especially when they start asking about birth fathers.
Oh, yes.
And it may lead into talks about poverty. There could be substance use disorder, other things that are really hard. And I think parents do get, they contract around having to have all those conversations and get it right. So figuring out where our own tough parts are and getting some help ourselves and how to deliver that from adoption informed therapists would be if there's something sticking you up, we think you should probably get some help on that. But if you get really good at having these adoption conversations, some of the other things that happen in the preteen and teen years are going to go easier too, because you've just become pretty adept at handling why questions.
Right. And I think you don't have to, if I don't know the answer to something, I just say, wow, that's a really great question. Let me think about it. Let me find out. And, and I'll come back and we'll talk about it. So, and I think also mistakes too, we were going to make mistakes, we're going to fumble. And I've certainly done that. And I've come back and like, hey, you know what? I don't feel like I answered that so great. Can I do a double take? Let me tell you now. So I think it's, we can't be afraid to hold back because we think we're going to make mistakes, because we will. But, I think it's that we're willing to keep coming back to the table. And like you said, the earlier, the more comfortable you are taking, having these conversations right from the beginning, you'll just be, when it gets to the more tougher information to share, tricky information, you'll be that much more ahead of the game, because it really is about us doing our work, because that's part of our responsibility.
And I did exactly what you said. I took a pause when I didn't know the answer. And then back when there were a lot of adoption forums that were cross-triad, this is why cross-triad forums and spaces like Creating a Family on Facebook are so important for adoptive parents, because I could pause, tell my kids, let me get back to you on this. And then I can go ask people who know more than I do. And then I can come back better informed and better prepared. So that's a really good tip.
Yes. And I love that, that particular forum, because it really is well moderated. And I think and it has every, all of the constellation in there. And it's so important for us to sit back and listen and take in information.
And I know that there's one being built here too, at AFFCNY too. So this would be a really good place to foster cross-triad relationships, so that you have advisors on call.
Who doesn't need that?
All right. How do we include birth family in everyday life, Barbara?
Yes. Well, I think we do it. Well, we talk a lot. We go back, we have an open adoption. And what I mean about that is that we actually go and visit, and we haven't been there in a couple of years just because of COVID. And so we, go and we see everybody, and she hangs out with her brothers and sister and grandma and grandpa and cousins and aunts. And it's really, it's really joyous to see. We take pictures, our pictures are right alongside, pictures of brother and sister and aunts and uncles and mom. And so, we have all of our pictures on, one shelf, everyone's together. Yeah, I just think it's just, and it's finding, again, like, just those moments in everyday conversation, especially if you haven't talked about it in a while, because I find, like, again, like on forums or people like, oh, my child never brings up their birth family, they never talk about them. And I think a lot of, especially now as a teenager, no one's, she's not talking about to me about a lot of things. So, and that's certainly something that she's not going to bring up. But again, it's that ease, it's being comfortable. It's just being able to bring it up and start a conversation. So,
yeah, I think if you do have contact, then you have contact and you look for ways to bring them up. Like you said, you're so good at math. I bet you get that from Kay.
Yep.
If birth parents are not around or not known, that presents kind of an extra layer of challenges, especially like this is like for families who adopt and they end up with a baby who came through safe haven or something. And there is really nothing. There's nothing until there's clues that can be followed up on with DNA testing, or that's probably outside of my arena. But in those cases, even then, there are things that adoptive parents can do to help connect the child with the fact that they have a previous life. They have something going on before they came into that home. I asked Gail Swift, who is a prolific adoption writer, to comment on this on my blog once, and she mentioned counterbalancing fantasy with a cohesive narrative. And this is again where a life book would come in handy to try to take pieces and make sense of them for your child before they are able to do that. She also suggested to release shame, the shame that can come from being relinquished, replace that with light and like. So be willing to talk about it, create that space to shine light on it. Don't keep it in the dark. Maybe find other families with adoption as part of their story too, so that the child is familiar with it and doesn't feel like the only one. Another thing that Gail mentioned is to stock your adoption bookshelf, which we've mentioned before too. Make sure that you have lots and lots of resources to normalize adoption and the fact that there are birth parents out there somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did we touch on everything? Yeah.
I think
yeah. And you mentioned something else. You said if our child is never talking about their birth parents,
oh yes,
that does not mean that they are not ever thinking about them. And that is a common misconception that adoptive parents can have, is this, we'll just let them bring it up. But they are probably thinking about it more than they're talking about it, probably a lot more from what we hear adult adoptees say. So we suggest dropping pebbles. I think that's a term that Holly Golden came up with. And you just once in a while put out there, oh, I wonder if your birth mom liked chocolate chip cookies the way you do. Or, oh, that hospital, did you know you were born in that hospital? And then if your child is ready in that moment to have that conversation with you, they'll pick up the pebble and have that conversation with you. But you don't have to force it. You don't have to impose your ideas of what the conversation should look like, but you're giving opportunities along the way.
Yep. And that's what it's all about. Keeping it going, because
having conversations and being approachable.
Oh, so this one, this is you for sure, because I just have one, you have two.
I have two children, and I hear this a lot from adoptive families that have 2 or more children. It is such a hard, aching situation for an adoptive parent to have one child with really attentive, really fantastic first parents there around, and the other one doesn't, for whatever reason. And so we are so used to trying to fix things for our children and make sure that both sizes of ice cream cones are the same. And we like things to be even, and we don't like one of our children to suffer. So when this comes up a lot, what do we do when our one child has birth parents around and the other doesn't? So what I often try to coach my my clients to do is to, and whenever you're faced with something that seems to do with adoption, try to take away the adoption charge. Try to figure out what this would look like if it wasn't about adoption, and then how would you handle it? Because then you've kind of removed all the messiness that's around adoption, and you maybe have a clearer path.
I love
So
that.
in this case, what you could do is, there are other times, right, when adoptive parents have two different kids that have two different sets of luck or talent or something else. Maybe it's one child getting into the advanced math class and the other one not, or one kid making the basketball team and the other one not. And in those cases, ask yourselves, adoptive parents, how do you resolve that? You don't take away from the child who has the extra, and you can't make it happen for the child who has the deficit. You meet both children where they are. You give space for the child who's grieving, having sadness, suffering. You give space for that. You sit with them. You can't fix it. You don't try to fix it. You don't use words that say you're going to fix it. You sit with them. You let them have their feelings.
Yeah.
And if those, a lot of times if feelings have the space to flow, they will flow and they can release when we give them space. If that doesn't happen, that would be a time to maybe get some extra help from professionals. And then you also meet your other child who's got the bonus. You would keep them from being mean about it, but you celebrate with them. And there's lots of dynamics between sisters and brothers and brothers and brothers and sisters. So
exactly. I love that, taking the angst out of it, by relating it, like you said, just take that piece out of it and see, where your feelings are. And it normalizes it for us. It's a really good tip. Because once you add on adoption, it's like, oh, you kind of freeze up. You're not sure what to do. And
that reframing can be such a powerful tool to, if you can figure out what would this look like if it wasn't adoption, and then how would I deal with it? That reframing. So, okay. We are on number 6.
Mm-hmm.
What if there's no information to share?
Yes. Well, I'm of, again, that a big philosophy that is, as part of being a parent, that we do everything that we can to find as much information as possible, right from the get-go. And again, I just feel that it's getting, do whatever kind of search, get kind of any kind of names, information while it's all fresh, keep a file. So, and again, DNA, that's huge, tracking people down, Facebook. At some point there is going to be some information, I feel that, you can latch on to, hopefully. I feel that, but I feel that it's important for us to do the work, and not leave it up to your kid, like, the last thing that I would want is my daughter's ready to go to college, start a job, go off, and that she has to feel like she has to stop her life and find out this information. That I just wouldn't want her.
Yeah, we should be.
That I just feel like that this is part of our job, that it's up to us to find out as much information as possible that we can.
Yeah, all along the way, identity building is such a huge thing, especially for preteens and teenagers and kids and people going off to college. But if we've done the pre-work on trying to bring everything in ahead of time, that's going to help so much. And this is probably where I should have talked about safe haven. And this is why safe haven laws can be problematic, because that blank page of knowing nothing is a really hard starting point for identity building. And let's also just say that we need all states to open up original birth certificates to adult adoptees, so they don't have to go through their parents to get that original birth certificate. If you can get your child's original birth certificate in your state, do get it on behalf of your child in the early days, in case your child can't get it on their own in the later days. We need to keep dropping states that are holding adoptees back from getting what they should have.
Yep.
So, all right.
Up to our book giveaway. Ding, 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 ding. the first book is, I contributed an essay to this fabulous book. And so I'll just read a little bit about. It's a document, a community, a manual, a helpline, a chorus of voices expressing the gamut of complicated emotions that accompany a person of a certain age contemplating the leap into parenthood. So this is a fun read. And let me explain the book giveaway. Whoever answers, this is a true or false question. So whoever answers the question first correctly will win a copy of this book. Okay, ready? Here we go. True or false? The best time to begin talking to your child about adoption is when they are old enough to understand it. Ding, 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 ding.
True. Brenda Barney.
Do we have?
Yes, we have a winner, Barbara. We have Emil. It was the first person to answer the question.
Correctly. All right. Yes.
Yay, thank you.
Yay. So is it Emily?
Yes, Emily.
Emily.
Sorry.
Yay, that's okay. So please email me your snail mail address to Barbara at everyfamiliesgotone.com and I will get you your book.
Thank you. You're awesome.
Woohoo!
And the answer was false. We're going to give information all along the way, starting from day one or yesterday, whichever comes first.
That's right.
We're not going to wait for there to be some sort of verification of understanding.
That's right. Get on it.
All right.
All right. So now we're going outside of the home, these questions. So it is involving, people outside the home. So people that you do meet on the playground and, your extended family. Oh yeah, so this is a great one, right? We always have heard this. Won't the child be confused if you also include the birth parents in their life?
People like to second guess us, don't they?
They really do all the time. And
when it comes to open adoption and openness and adoption.
Yeah, it's like, no, I think, and again, taking it out of the adoption realm, are kids confused when you present two sets of grandparents?
Or 3 or 4.
Exactly. No, just keep piling on. More presents, more love, more goodness. So no, and I think, as you said, like kids, they're smart. They get it.
Yeah, kids can understand a lot more than we give them credit for. So and I have to say something about this one. I was at a conference many years ago where Jim Gritter was presenting, and he was a social worker and pioneer in the early days of open adoption. And first of all, I want to say that children are not confused, but then second of all, we need to get to, so what do you do? What do you say to people who think your child is going to be confused? Jim Gritter had that answer. He said, is it your experience that to be fully informed is to be confused? I just think that is
really great.
Yeah. that says it in a nice way, and then will make people kind of rethink their assumption about adoption being confusing and too many birth parents being confusing.
Right. I agree.
All right.
All right. 8. Oh yes. Nosy neighbors. How to answer probing questions. She looks nothing like you. Is she an only child when she has birth siblings? Yes, I have had, she looks nothing like you. I was in the library, which is a great place when you're a mom and connect with other moms and kids. And they had this big play space downstairs, and this mom, yelled across the room, across, 30 other moms, hey, where does she get the blonde hair from? And, I wasn't gonna yell across the room, oh, because we adopted her. I said, well, it runs in the family. So, it was just in that moment, just it's one of those things. And I did like that mom very much. And I think, in a quieter setting, I probably would have shared, a lot more information, with her. But yeah, not everybody has to know what's going on clearly. There was one woman that I told, it was a stranger, was in the line. I think it was at one of Babies R Us, and I was pushing my daughter in the stroller. She was a couple of months old, and pregnant woman was there, and she was like, oh, how old is she? A couple months. Oh, and you lost all that baby weight. And I said, that's what I shared immediately. I said, no, I'm an adoptive mom, because I can't, want everyone to know the realities. Like, please don't base it off of me. And then, is she an only child? Because my daughter is an only child in my household. But, she talks, especially when she was younger, very free, talking about her brothers and her sister. And, so, we shared with her teachers, if she brings up, her siblings, because, she's adopted and she has siblings. And I always made a point, like, don't bring up adoption, that's something she needs to bring up. Don't single her out, like, oh, she's adopted, it's really, if she brings it up, you can, talk to her about it, but don't bring it up to her. But I was on the playground, and she, people always, ask, oh, is she your only one? And again, if she was within earshot, I would take a beat back, or I would, say, she's, to let my daughter answer. And she would typically say, yeah, I have brothers and sisters. And it's like, oh, you must be busy. And she's like, oh, and they live, in Indiana. And then, I would break out into a sweat, because I'm thinking, great, now I have to like explain everything and why. And, and the other mom is like, oh, my husband, his kids are in Maryland. Da, da, da. It's like, oh, okay. So it's just, we think, again, like these conversations are going to go one way, and we get all crazy, and we really don't have to, because there's so many different families, and there's no need to break out into a sweat. Really,
Yeah,
truly.
we can roll with the flow.
Roll with the flow.
There's some discernment that we can do in these moments when we're asked a question by somebody. We can kind of intuit what their intention is. If they're being nosy, or as we call them on nextdoor.com, the Gladys Kravitzes of the world, we may not want to engage too much with them, because they're using it for their own purposes, and it doesn't benefit you. So you can always just turn around and say, what makes you ask?
I love that. And it's something that we do need to teach our kids.
Yeah.
The whole WISE principle from Case, like we can use that.
Yeah. And we can model that.
Yeah. And I think that's really important.
Sometimes, though, there are people who are maybe in our lives or around our lives, like the other parents on the playing field of something. And it might be a time for educating them, like the E and the Wise Up program. And so I'm going to address the Are They Related ones, one that's on the screen, because that I used to get asked that sometimes with my kids, and people would know we were an adoptive family, and they would say, are they related? So one of the ways I would try to educate the asker in a gentle way is, are you asking me if they have the same birth parents? Because I think that's what they were asking. So I just, a different kind of reframing, but we reframe it to see if we're getting to what they're actually asking. And then I can say, well, they do have separate birth parents, but we are related because we're all a family. So,
yep.
So anything else on that? She looks nothing like you. Is she an only child? You've covered everything. Good job, Barbara.
I think we did. Okay. Oh, this is a good one, right? My child adoption story. What can I share? What can't I share? Yeah, I think this is a very confusing one for adoptive parents, because it's all about, in the beginning, right, that it's all about a baby. We want a baby just like anybody else. We want a baby. We're in that. And then we have a baby and it's really still all about us, because we look at this baby that it's an extension of us. And I think it's, I think most adoptive parents overshare in the beginning because they're just so excited, and that we don't know anything really, being in the situation. And I really do think it's something that we have to learn very quickly, what to share, what not to share.
I've always imagined this as toothpaste in a tube. Because especially with social media, which wasn't around as much in yours and my day, but especially now when adoptive parents have worked really hard to become parents, and then we want to share that story, and we blurt it out, we squirt it out of the tube. And so I came up with 3 questions to help avoid the blurt or the squirt with the toothpaste tube full of your child's story. And just to clarify, to kind of do a little mindfulness practice of what's behind this. So one is, does this person need to know? Because there are sometimes that somebody will need to know, maybe a teacher who's working with your child who needs to understand something, or medical professionals, or maybe another mom. It can be a lot of people might benefit from knowing and be able to relate with your child in a more effective way. The answer to this question doesn't inform your decision. It's just a clue. The second question would be, why am I wanting to tell? And I think this is a really big one. If you can look inside and say, I want to tell this because it's going to help my child with something, that's different than I want to tell because this is going to make me feel really good. So as long as you know that difference, you can make a decision from that knowing. And then the third thing would be to take the long view and to figure out what are the consequences that could come from telling in this moment to this person. What could happen a month from now, a year from now, maybe even 5 years from now. If I can't get this back into the tube, are there going to be any consequences that I need to foresee now in order to avoid future harm for my adoptee?
Yeah, that's why I stopped blogging. Right, because I used to blog for the adoptive family, their social network, and every post was really just I made people read it because you didn't want to overshare, and it was just and then I would break out into a sweat, and and then you got to stop. And that's why it was so wonderful, like switching over really to more of the writing articles, and so you have, like, it's just easier to manage your personal stuff. And there's not too many baby adoption bloggers. You get to a certain point and you're like, no, I can't anymore.
Yeah, they kind of fall off.
Yeah.
Our adoptees can't give informed consent for many, 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 many years.
Right.
And so we have to be mindful that we are the protectors of that informed consent on their behalf.
Yes.
All right.
And again, that's where the principles of WISE does. That's
let's talk, because we've talked about you can walk away, and I think teaching your adoptee to walk away if something is not want anything they want to engage with, that is fine. Saying it's private, that's the I in WISE Up. It's private. I'm not going to say any more on this. The S is for share with discretion and discernment, in a way that once you deem that this is going to be something you do want to share, you can share that in a way that still protects your child. And then the E is educate, like we've talked about too. And Barbara, you're so good at this part, is using humor. Just whenever you can lighten up, using humor too.
Thank you.
All right, shall we have
another
book giveaway?
Oh yes, hooray!
All right, this time I'm
Lori.
The Open-Hearted Way to Open Adoption.
Oh,
the premise of this book is that adoption creates a split in a person between their biology, the DNA they're born with, and their biography, the life that's written by all the people we call family, and openness. I first thought it was open adoption, but now I think it's really something different. Openness is the tool that we can use to help reintegrate what was split. and give the adoptee the best chance they have to have all their pieces, integrate all the pieces of their identity.
Yes, this is
So-
a great book. It's very well worn and thumbed down in my house. It's like the Bible. It's really great.
And what, there isn't an app or a Wikipedia page that tells you if this happens, then do this. But what I do think adoptive parents can figure out is an orientation to come from so that we can find those answers in the moment with the circumstances that we're facing. If we can get that orientation or that GPS, that North Star, I think that is where we can find our own answers and not need an app. So this one is going to be multiple choice. And there will be one answer, A, B, or C. So get ready when we put up the question. After an adoption is finalized, and this will be a little more reading than the other one. Here we go.
A, adoptive parents hold all the power. B, birth parents who were promised visits can expect those visits to happen. C, adoptive parents are now the real parents.
We get a little more
Do we have an
diversity in the answers,
answer?
Michelle?
So
I
the
saw
first,
a correct answer.
the first real answer I have was from Emily again, A.
Emily.
Why don't we let Emily choose which one she wants, and let's take another one. Well, I don't know we didn't plan for this contingency.
I don't need another book. I'm very, very involved with.
Thank you.
I
You
am
helped us
so
find our answer in the
involved
moment.
depth. I'm an adoptee. I'm a birth mom. I'm looking to adopt now. I've lived adoption. And so these answers, it's fun to answer these. But
Wonderful.
someone else, whoever did the next nice answer is
Okay.
perfect.
No wonder you get them all right, Emily.
Well, I'm also a little competitive.
Got a fast finger.
So the
Right.
next person that I'm seeing that had the correct answer is Tori Carroll.
All right, Tori.
All right, Tori. That's right.
Oh, here's the answer. We hold all we
Easy.
adoptive parents, we hold all the power.
That's right. So use grace.
And Tori, if you would take a picture of this or write this down or reach out to somebody later, if you send me your snail mail address by email, I will ship this book to you. And thank you so much for knowing that answer. I'm sure there were others who knew that answer as well. All right, we are on question
Ding, ding,
10,
ding,
and we're
ding,
almost
ding,
right on
ding.
schedule, Barbara.
Go
ahead.
for us. Woo.
These are your burning questions. This is where we can get into the IC90 in the chat. I mean, I know that Michelle's probably been sorting through those madly. We want to take your questions and ruminate on those. We, in case nobody had any, we stocked the fish pond with a couple of our own questions that didn't make our original cut. So choose from this or choose something else.
I can't see. Is Michelle going through the questions?
I am.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't know if you wanted to wait till others ask their own, but back kind of towards the beginning, somebody asked what happens if your child was not adopted until they were 5 years old?
I think I'm going to need to ask the question asker to say more on like what you're asking about. Are you talking about telling?
Maybe they're not here.
Michelle?
So I don't know if that was mine. It was my adopted child was adopted when they were 5, and I think you kind of answered it.
Okay.
You know, she always argues with me, kind of going back to she grew in my belly, you know, and all that stuff. And it you know, she knows, she remembers, you know, the whole adoption process, but she seems to keep wanting to go back to, she wants me to be
Mhm.
the one that gave birth to her. And, and I always correct her, but I guess and I thought that you had spoken about it pretty well. I always try to just kind of reiterate that what honestly happened, and I try to bring some humor, well, as much humor as you can bring into it, but she didn't grow in my belly, but I'm so thankful that she grew in, her mother's belly and all that stuff. But it's hard because, in this case, her biological father had custody of the kids, so that's who was really taking care of them. And she kind of totally rejects that she even had a father, and I talked to her about him, and she just rejects that. No, it's like he doesn't even exist. And I think so much of it, to me, seems to go back to, well, that's who gave her up, and she's having a really hard time getting over that. And I struggle with how much do you push? Are you just like, let it go for now and try again later?
How old is she now?
8.
She's 8. Okay. All right. So I have a couple of thoughts. Barbara, did you want to say anything?
I think, and maybe you let me know if this is right too. Like what I would do is really what you said. I mean, if you're getting like a big no, even to your response, but you've said your response and then maybe wouldn't push it. And just, again, like, drop those little things here and there, just about, her dad. So that, again, it's that, she's young, right? So I think that's really it. And then there's going to be a point where she is going to feel more comfortable talking about it. You could probably have a conversation, but I think it is just, later on. But I think it's meeting the child where they are if she's not ready to talk about it. But you to kind of bring it up now and then with, with these little pebbles that Lori has said before.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, that's spot on, Barbara. I would also say that the conversation that you're wanting to have about her is now secondary, and what's more coming up to be dealt with is that your daughter has some major feelings about her birth father that she is not able to process on her own. So I want to stay in my lane. I'm not a therapist, but it seems like this would be a time to if you haven't already, you may already have done this, is to start working with a therapist to help her pull that out, look at it, and start processing it.
Yes, and I've been looking for that right person. So
yeah, and maybe the network can help with that. I don't know if then maybe somebody from the network could say if you got some resources on that. I do know
the AFF's, the coalition does have a list of adoption competent therapists.
Great.
So you can reach out to us and we'll point you in the right direction.
That would be a really good start. I want to say something else about something Barbara and I have in common and how it relates to this. Barbara wrote originally under the name Improv Mom, and she comes from the world of improv comedy. I never did improv comedy, but I studied it. I never got on a stage. But one of the things that you learn on your very first night of figuring out improv comedy is something that's so helpful in adoptive parenting, and that is changing your yes buts to yes ands. So if your child says, no, I wanted to grow in your tummy, you don't say yes, but you didn't. You say yes, and I wish you did too, but then you wouldn't be you, and all the beautiful things that Barbara said before. So that but is against and the and is with, and we're always going for the with and the and. So that was just a small thing that I wanted to mention.
Yeah. And the and keeps the conversations going, like the but kind of. This is what I like, that you're not including the child to really have the conversation. So yes, I love it.
All right.
I love the end of the explaining again, the yes ands. I think that's something that we could hear over and over again. So I see this other question here, and it's my 13-year-old has siblings older and younger, but does not know yet. How do I tell her?
They don't know about the siblings?
I believe so, yes.
So these would be birth siblings, I'm assuming, birth siblings. Okay. Yeah, you, Michelle, you probably don't know either.
Right.
I guess the question is, why doesn't she know? And what is keeping you from telling? And
Yeah.
maybe there's more that the asker can contribute.
Just don't know how to bring it up. Okay.
I'm not even watching the chat. I got too many.
Yeah, I can see it here that she had said, I just don't know how to bring it up. And how old is how old is?
13?
Oh,
13.
I'm sorry, I
Oh,
can
no.
come off speaker. I just,
That's okay.
she's in the other
Yeah.
room, that's why. Yes, she's 13, had her since she was 1.5 years, but adoption didn't go through till she was 5, and she was never introduced to her older siblings. And I found out about 1 year ago that she has a younger sibling, and she has no memory of her birth mother. And, you know, we just kind of kept sailing through.
Has anybody asked you not to tell her?
Nope,
Okay.
not at all. Mm-mm. I personally just don't know how to do it.
What's
Somebody,
your fear of telling?
Jen Matthews suggested maybe reaching out to an adoption competent therapist. I know, I don't know your name because there's numbers. Is this Ruth? Well, whether you're Ruth or not.
Yes.
Are you in the New York City area?
I am.
Oh, Ruth, if you're interested in an adoption competent therapist, email me, okay?
Okay. And I get your email address.
Pat@AFFCNY.org. I'll put it in the chat right now.
Cheers, thanks.
And
You know, I had a situation where, and again, I think it's great because I did reach out to a therapist as well, because I got a big piece of new information. And, you know, I talked to a therapist, like how to, you know, introduce it to my daughter. And it went really well. It was just, again, you know, I think I would definitely reach out and talk so you feel comfortable, because really it was about me feeling comfortable. And also what I told my daughter, I comes from Long Island, it's creeping out now, that, you know, I said that I had just found out this information. So I wanted to let her know that this was recent, which I think that, you know, that's pretty recent information that you received as well. So, I mean, that part of it, you know, it's like, I know that's what I told her. And I was like, look, I just found out this information and I wanted to share it with you. And so I did. And she was like, yeah, okay. And then I was like, you know, and then it was something that I was still figuring out. And I said that, hey, I need to, you know, I would like to find out more information about it. And then I can share that with you and we can, you know, talk about, you know, what we do next. So I just want you to know that it's, you know, you just sound so emotional. So I think it's definitely going to be okay. And I think, again, you know, the information, you know, we get it. And I think, you know, it's the point is that, like, the telling of it and the honesty behind it and the caring. So I think you're going to do great. I really do.
And I agree. It is the fear of dealing with this, but also I did know about the older one from the very beginning, but because she remained a foster child for a few years, you know, you just didn't do anything. So by the time she was 5 and the process went through, I was like, okay, now what?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
so, you know, sorry, then fast forward to, and I personally come from a large family, so I I understand, or I know the need of having siblings around and all that great thing, because I come from a large family, even though they're not here in the States with me, but she's been part of that. And I really want her to know, but I don't know how to go to do it now, you know, and I'm doing it with a 13-year-old dealing with 13-year-old stuff as well.
Yes. Well, they know everything, so
Mhm.
you have that going for you.
Yes, there is that too.
And Ruth, I think when you do talk to, when the coalition helps you find a therapist and you talk to them, this will be them helping you with the child, but also the private work for you is to start with a question: what is your worst fear about this? And like Barbara says, that probably won't happen, but when you explore that, then you'll know what work you need to do around it.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, when you, and this is in that Suck at Adoption Telling 2020 post, but by waiting, we end up with two problems, not just the how to tell, but now explaining why we haven't told. And so the therapist can help you figure out both of those pieces.
Okay, thank you.
Pat, did you have something else?
Just a quick thing I wanted to share with your audience. The coalition has a grant just for this year to offer 5 sessions with adoption competent therapists who live in the New York City area.
I'm moving.
So I'm able to offer that to Ruth and anybody else who might have an issue that we can help out with 5 sessions.
What about Westchester County?
That would be considered the New York City area.
Okay, that's where I am.
That is the fabulous resource.
Wow.
Bonus.
Thank you so much.
Maybe better than a book.
I don't know. Michelle, do we have time for one more question if we go fast, or do you want us to really wrap this up?
No, I think we do. Question was from Emily, and she said that her daughter has I don't want to move this so I could still see it, a bad experience with her birth mother due to horrible experiences that they lived through. How involved should I get in trying to heal this rift?
I may have missed it, but how old is the daughter?
I didn't see that, or if I move my thing, I may, it has very negative feelings towards her birth mother. So I don't see an age.
So I kind of picture that we're, as adoptive parents, are gradually turning the reins over to our kids. So the answer to this kind of depends on how much of the reins are in your child's hands, because you're talking about the degree to which you should help. I firmly believe that our children at some point should have the option to have whatever relationship they want with their anybody in their lives that they want, including birth family. But we also need
teenagers. They're teenagers.
Teenagers. Okay. And again, 13 is going to be different from 17, but getting support so that those decisions of whether or not to have contact are based on not fears and wounds, but real concerns, like I just don't, I think this is another one for an adoption competent therapist. Your job in the repair is to not get in the way, to not let your own feelings or your own vibe about her have an effect on one way or the other. Your job is to stay Switzerland.
Yeah. So if there's anything, just to create empathy, to in the relationship, so that they have a different perspective of it, that they can, again, the child is going to do, or the young adult is going to make that decision whether they want to move ahead with the relationship or not. But that, that they realize that, I don't know, just to give grace. I think that's part of our job, to extend that and model it, and so that if that they have a better perspective, that nobody grows up wanting to be addicted to drugs, for instance. That's not somebody's intent. Right, that for Pam, that all parents are just human and they make mistakes. So I think if we can, again, just from conversations throughout their life, that they are able to see that from us, to model it, that parents do make mistakes and that there are good parts and bad parts. And again, that it's up to them to make their decision and to explore, with a therapist. But from a parenting point of view, is that if we can show our kids how to extend grace and empathy, I think that will benefit them.
I concur with that. I think we're at the end of our time. So if you would like to take a picture of these resources that we have, and then also I'm going to maybe quickly go to just our closing thoughts, shift from a both and either or mindset to a both and heart set, orient on connection and trust. And Barbara, you have something really important to say on this one.
When I was a new adoptive mom, I really did believe that there was no difference between being a mom by adoption and a mom by biology. And, really, I quickly found out that I was absolutely wrong. And I didn't realize how much of adoptive parenting would really be part of my life and my child's life, and that it's it's such an important part of my child rearing, weaving the people and her story into our lives. It's really one of the greatest gifts that I can give her, that it really is my biggest responsibility as an adoptive parent.
And what you told me once, Barbara, is that the child is not an extension of yourself, even though it feels like it in the early days.
Right. Exactly. I remember getting the new birth certificate and it's, I'm the mom, and a birth certificate, that should be one thing. If anything, it should be about the child. And it's really about, forming their identity early on. And that's why we have these early conversations, because it's about them learning about themselves and their whole family.